A year of scandal. The head of the Diocese of Buffalo steps down following claims he mishandled clergy sexual abuse allegations. We have reaction. High crimes and misdemeanors. The investigation into President Donald Trump continues with hearings on what constitutes an impeachable offense. We have a report as the president meets with other world leaders in London. The vice president in Michigan, as Mike Pence meets with faith leaders in the Mitten State. He talks to EWTN News Nightly. We'll preview the conversation. And prayer and trust. Pope Francis tells the faithful why they should not believe in magic or fortune telling. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, December 4th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Mark Irons. Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Buffalo, New York Bishop Richard Malone. It follows widespread criticism from Malone's staff, priest, and the public over his handling of allegations of clergy sexual misconduct. The Vatican announced the resignation in a brief statement, adding that the Pope had named Bishop Edward Scharfenberger of Albany to run the Buffalo Diocese temporarily until a permanent replacement is found.
My heart just goes out to you.
The resignation comes after Malone learned the results of a Vatican-mandated inquiry into the Western New York Diocese and its handling of abuse cases. In a statement, Malone said he concluded after much prayer and discernment that the spiritual welfare of the people of the Diocese of Buffalo will be better served by a new bishop who perhaps is better able to bring about the reconciliation, healing, and renewal that is so needed. The diocese has been named in more than 220 recent lawsuits by people who allege they were sexually abused by priests. Many of the allegations date back decades, long before Malone's arrival in Buffalo in 2012. Pressure on him to leave was intense. Malone has admitted to making mistakes in cases involving adult victims, but he had firmly refused to resign and insisted he wanted to stay on the job to see the diocese through a process of renewal. In September, a group of lay Catholics that had been working with Malone to restore trust in the church instead joined in calls for his resignation. The group, the Movement to Restore Trust, said it received word of Malone's departure with a mixture of sadness and relief. In a press conference this morning, Bishop Scharfenberger had a message for the people of the Diocese of Buffalo.
I am here for you. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to walk with you, and I'm here to help you heal. I would prefer to convey that message by what I do and not just by what I say.
In the past year, two key members of Malone's staff went public with concerns about his leadership, including Bishop Malone's former secretary and his executive assistant. The Buffalo Diocese has paid out over more than $18 million to more than 100 victims under a compensation program established last year. Since August, it has been named in a wave of lawsuits under a New York state law that suspended the usual statute of limitations and opened a one-year window for victims to pursue claims regardless of when the abuse happened. We are now joined from Buffalo by Siobhan O'Connor, former executive assistant to Bishop Malone. Siobhan, welcome back. You resigned from your position after 3 years as Bishop Malone's executive assistant. You accused him of covering up clergy sex abuse. What's your reaction now that his resignation has been accepted?
Well, it's quite a relief that it has officially taken place. There have been some false alarms, some high hopes. So it's quite a relief that it's now official.
And the bishop had been under pressure to resign for some time now. What do you make of the timing of all of this, of this announcement? And are you disappointed that it has taken this long?
Well, it certainly is quite a shock that it did take this long. It is disappointing, and it's just increased the distress here in our diocese for parishioners and survivors alike. The timing suggests that finally Rome realized through the report that was generated through the Apostolic Visitation and through the continued media coverage, they must have either realized what an embarrassment it was or realized that it wasn't a self-correcting situation.
What message does this send to the survivors of clergy sex abuse?
Well, I hope it reminds them that their voices are so important and so powerful. We're very grateful for their courage in coming forward. They have changed this narrative tremendously, and we owe so much of this to their courage.
Can you talk just a little about your frustrations? You've been involved in this so closely. And again, back to the resignation, why has it taken this long, and how do you feel about it?
Well, for me, it really speaks to the fact that the hierarchy of the church is really in many ways not in tune with the needs of the people. because we certainly have been clamoring for change here for well over a year. And for a while, I thought maybe Rome had us on mute, that they were just tired of hearing about Buffalo. So I really do think it speaks to the fact that there's additional changes that need to be made, but I'm trying to take it as a positive first step in that direction.
And as a lifelong member of the Diocese of Buffalo, what are your hopes for the diocese going forward?
Well, I hope that we can begin a new chapter now. I was encouraged by Bishop Scharfenberger, our interim bishop's remarks this morning, and I want to maintain an optimistic spirit. It's so easy to be cynical now because of everything we've endured here, and I respect people's skepticism, and I think we have to have a healthy skepticism, but I still want to be optimistic. There's always hope, and I do believe that our diocese can emerge from this a stronger diocese, and hopefully the survivors will be strengthened as well.
So this resignation, it's the right step forward, and it really will bring healing and restoration and trust. Is that the hope?
Yes, it is. I believe that it was that first necessary step. Bishop Malone had come to symbolize so much of what was wrong and dysfunctional in our diocese, and by having him removed, I believe that we can now move forward. And it really is it's like an early Christmas gift to be able to have this change happening now before the end of the year.
Siobhan O'Connor, former executive assistant to Bishop Malone, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me on, Mark. Pleasure to speak with you.
Vice President Mike Pence is slamming the impeachment inquiry into his boss, President Donald Trump. The Vice President spoke to EWTN News Nightly's Wyatt Goolsby after meeting with faith leaders in West Michigan.
But I think the American people have the facts. I mean, you can read the transcript and see there was no quid pro quo. President Zelensky said again this week that he felt no pressure. When I met with President Zelensky in Poland on the president's behalf, all we talked about was President Trump's concern about corruption in Ukraine and the need for European support. And when I reported the progress that Ukraine was making in those areas, President Trump released the aid in September 11th. And all of those things are hard facts that the American people can see for themselves. And I think they can see that what's happening on Capitol Hill is a disgrace. And the truth is, it's not just a disgrace what they're doing, but also it's a disgrace what they're not doing, Wyatt.
Has there been any consideration by yourself and other top administration officials to testify on Capitol Hill? It seems like one of the best ways to potentially clear the president's name would be to go in front of the House Democrats and talk about it.
Well, I think it's important that the American people have the facts. And the focus here is on a phone call that the president had with President Zelensky. And President Trump essentially took the unprecedented step of releasing a transcript of a telephone call with a foreign leader. And in that transcript, the American people can see there was no quid pro quo. I mean, for my part, I wasn't even aware of the allegations that aid to Ukraine was tied to investigations until they became public. I mean, all of the focus that the president had in my conversations with him was on the lack of European support and our desire to see Ukraine make progress on what frankly had been decades of corruption. When President Zelensky was elected this spring, it was on an anti-corruption platform, Wyatt. And when I met with him in Poland, we talked about the progress that he'd made, about hundreds of bills that had been introduced in the anti-corruption agenda that he was advancing. When I shared those things with the president, as well as his commitment to work with us to enlist more European support, President Trump released the aid. And again, those are all the facts. And there's an old saying that facts are stubborn things. And I think it's the reason why millions of Americans see this partisan impeachment for what it is. And they really want to see this Congress, end all of this divisive politics and get back to working on the things that are going to make a difference in their lives.
You can see more of Wyatt's conversation with Vice President Mike Pence tomorrow evening at 6 and 9 p.m. Eastern on EWTN News Nightly. Several constitutional lawyers tell lawmakers President Trump committed an impeachable offense, but another professor warned to impeach with no crime would set a dangerous precedent. The House Judiciary Committee moves closer to possible impeachment, and today they jumped into what the Constitution says. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvey joins us with more. Jason.
Mark, the Constitution says Congress can remove a president for bribery, treason, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. But those words were written down hundreds of years ago. So today lawmakers ask, what do these words mean?
This committee could soon write articles of impeachment.
Do President Trump's demands on Ukraine also establish the high crime of bribery?
Yes, they do.
4 constitutional scholars debate what the Constitution lists as reasons to remove the president.
President Trump has committed impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors by corruptly abusing the office of the presidency. Specifically, President Trump has abused his office by corruptly soliciting President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine to announce investigations of his political rivals in order to gain personal advantage, including in the 2020 presidential election.
Democrats picked 3 of the scholars.
If what we're talking about is not impeachable, then nothing is impeachable. This is precisely the misconduct that the framers created a constitution, including impeachment, to protect against.
Republicans got to pick 1 scholar to testify.
This would be the first impeachment in history where there would be considerable debate and, in my view, not compelling evidence of the commission of a crime.
Professor Jonathan Turley says he did not vote for Donald Trump. Still, he warns Congress this impeachment would set a dangerous precedent.
This isn't improvisational jazz. Close enough is not good enough. If you're going to accuse a president of bribery, you need to make it stick.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Democrats haven't yet decided whether they're going to have the House vote to impeach. Now, Democrats earlier said they wanted this whole process to be bipartisan, but so far Republicans are united in defending the president. Mark?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thanks, Jason. President Trump is in England for the 70th anniversary of NATO. He canceled a news conference that would have started during the impeachment hearing, but during a meeting with Italy's prime minister, the president commented on the news back home.
Well, I did. I saw it, and it's a joke. Everybody is saying it. I will tell you, it is a uniform statement. I think pretty much right down the road that what they're doing is a very bad thing for our country. It's of no merit, and the Republican Party has never been more unified, ever. They've never been as unified as they are right now.
President Trump met with several world leaders at the summit, but he clashed with a few of them, including calling Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau two-faced. The president later clarified his remarks.
And honestly, with Trudeau, he's a nice guy. I find him to be a very nice guy. But, you know, the truth is that I called him out on the fact that he's not paying 2%, and I guess he's not very happy about it. I mean, you were there, a couple of you were there, and he's not paying 2%, and he should be paying 2%. It's Canada, they have money, and they should be paying 2%.
The president was referring to Canada falling short of the NATO target of spending 2% of its gross domestic product on defense. Last week, the United States Senate passed a human rights bill supporting the demonstrators in Hong Kong. Today, Beijing responded. China's foreign minister calls the bill 100% interference in his country's domestic affairs. Wang Yi also says he hopes the legislation does not hinder trade negotiations between Beijing and Washington. But the U.S. House yesterday passed a resolution calling for sanctions on China for its mass internment of Uyghur Muslims. There is doubt over whether President Trump will hold a summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un by the end of the year. State media reports the North Korean leader rode a horse up a mountain that's considered sacred. He usually visits the region before making major decisions. Pyongyang's military leaders have threatened more nuclear tests if the U.S. does not hold another summit in the coming weeks. The president of Mexico has met with and prayed with family members of the 9 Americans killed in northern Mexico last month. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador says government officials are updating the LeBaron family on the investigation into the murders last month. The relatives arrived at Mexico's National Palace for the briefing. 9 dual Mexican-American citizens, members of a Mormon community, were killed by gunmen last month. Coming up, we'll hear about one European nation's pro-family agenda. Hungary has seen a surge in marriages this year following the introduction of government incentives for couples to marry and have children. But the reforms have yet to deliver a boost to the country's declining birth rate. Hungary's Central Statistic Office reports a 20% surge in the number of people getting married during the first 9 months of this year. The birth rate has fallen slightly this year to 1.48 babies per woman from 1.49. Joining me now is Katalin Novak, Hungary's Minister of State for Family Affairs. She is also Vice President of the governing Conservative Fidesz party. Katalin, welcome back.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
You're here in Washington for the second annual conference on family policy. The Embassy of Hungary is co-sponsoring. How has a commitment to strengthening families strengthened your country overall?
It is very good to get a feedback from our American friends that we are on the right track, that what we are doing in Hungary is also attracting attention from the United States, from all over actually, because it wasn't our aim. We just wanted to concentrate on our own people and to enable them to have as many children as they want to, when they want to have them, but it retires actually attention from the United States as well. So it's good to see that it is acknowledged what we are doing, and we are also acknowledging the efforts of the U.S. administration.
But despite these reforms in Hungary, there's not been an increase in births. Does that concern you? Do you expect that to turn around at all?
If we look at the demographic numbers or the changes, well, the fertility rate increased by over 20% in the last years, since 2011 when it was at its lowest at 1.23. The number of marriages hasn't been as high as it is right now in the last 40 years, so as it is 40-year high right now. The number of abortions is at its all-time low level. So everything is going to the right direction. But of course, it's not easy. I mean, it's a long struggle. We have had a demographic decline in Hungary for almost four decades right now. So that means that it's not an easy way to go to overcome our demographic difficulties, but we are trying to do so, trying to do our utmost in order to help.
I want to address some of the criticisms this program has seen. Some say that it's anti-immigration policies in the country, and they also say these benefits are targeted to benefit the middle class and not the poor. What's your response to these criticisms?
First of all, it's not anti-anything. It's pro-something. It's pro-family, pro-life. It's pro-choice, actually, because we are trying to enable the young people to have as many children as they want to, at the moment when they want to have them. That means that we want to give a real freedom of choice. If they want to have children, then they be able to have children. If they want to work and not to have children, they can choose to do so as well. If they want to have a large family, then to be able to have a large family. If they want to work and have a private life with a large family at the same time, then to be able to do both. So it's real pro-choice. It's a real choice that we would like to offer to the Hungarian people. So I don't see that it should raise any concerns. I don't see the point in this criticism. In fact, there are many feedbacks coming from ordinary people who, for example, want to hear that in Hungary from the 1st of January next year, we are going to introduce a total exemption from personal income tax paying for moms with at least 4 children lifelong. Then they say that, well, they would be happy to move to Hungary because they would like to take advantage of this possibility as well. They don't have it in their countries, so not anywhere in the world.
This year's conference was co-sponsored with the Embassy of Brazil. Are you hopeful Hungary will serve as a model for other countries for this type of program?
I would say that we are learning from each other, and we have already had this pro-family policy since 2010, so we have experience. That's why we can also just tell the others what our experience are and how we did it, what kind of challenges we do have, but we also learn from the others, of course. So we can learn from each other, I would rather say, and learn each other's best practices or the bad experiences as well. So we can learn from the US, from Brazil, from the European states as well, and they can maybe learn from the Hungarian states.
Katalin Novak, Hungary's Minister of State for Family Affairs and the Vice President of the governing Conservative Fidesz party. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Up next, Pope Francis tells the faithful about the power of trusting in Christ. And we'll hear from an American bishop who is in Rome for a meeting with the Holy Father.
Per favore, la magia non è cristiana.
Pope Francis says magic is not part of the Christian faith. At his weekly talk with pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says instead of talking with fortune tellers, we should pray and entrust our future to the Lord, and the grace of Christ will bring us everything we need. More U.S. bishops are in Rome this week to visit Pope Francis. The American church leaders are presenting reports on their diocese. The trips to the Vatican occur about once every 5 years. The group met with the Holy Father yesterday. They told him about their challenges and concerns. Bishop Michael Burbidge from the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, told EWTN Rome Bureau Chief Alan Holdren about the visit and meeting the Holy Father.
In an honest and a transparent way, he encouraged us to ask any questions we had of him, any suggestions we had for him or for his curia, and to allow that to be a dialogue, and he would respond to whatever we brought to him. And so it was very, very beautiful conversation.
In media would say that there have been certain tensions between the bishops of the United States and the Holy Father. Was there any sense of that?
None. Absolutely none. And you know, that's why I think this unlimited visit is such a great opportunity, because it shows the reality. You know, sometimes a story is created, but when we were together in our November meeting in Baltimore, it was the same way, in showing, you know, all of our priorities come from what the Holy Father is asking us to do. So everything we do as a conference of bishops is in support of the Holy Father, and it's always very respectful of him. So it's very difficult sometimes to hear or to read these stories that are talking about this division, and certainly come here to be with him. And what is reflected so very clearly is that unity, which, as in any family or in any relationship, needs to be reaffirmed. And that's what this opportunity has been given to us.
There have been a lot of issues talked about in the United States, from the sexual abuse crisis, the financial misconduct in some dioceses by some bishops. Also, the immigration issue. There's certain issues that really make for lively discussion and sometimes criticism. Did anything like that come up in your visit with the Holy Father?
So we were talking certainly about the sexual abuse crisis and the impact that has on the church, on the ministry of bishops, and certainly our great sadness and sorrow and for the tragic ways that victims have been hurt. So, even as a body, renewing that deep regret and sorrow and apology, but knowing that we have to work now to continue the great work we've been doing, especially since 2002, in coming up with those procedures, those policies that in every way humanly possible can prevent any such abuse from occurring. So to strengthen them, and knowing that this is just the beginning. We have to continue that work, to continue to do our part in our ministry of bringing healing and unity to the church.
Thank you, Bishop Michael Burbidge.
Thank you very much, Alan.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire News Nightly team, I'm Mark Irons. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.